The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, we are quite shocked that the government would want a report back date of 6 November, and as standing orders provide that any motion for a report back of less than 4 months be debatable, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Labor-led opposition to register our strong concern at this. Now, Mr Speaker, one wonders why it is that the government is taking this very unusual step of denying the Education and Science Select Committee, and through it the innovation community, a full and proper opportunity to make submissions on this bill, to have its case heard, to consider the submissions in the normal way, to write a proper report and to report back to this House within the normal time period. This is really only a couple of, well, not even 2 months. That is ridiculous. What is the government trying to hide, Mr Speaker, in the depths of this bill? What is going on at Industrial Research Limited that they're having to change the name, change the board and fossick through this bill in the dead of daytime, or actually in the dead of the evening, at any time the House is in session? It can meet on a Friday. It can put extra strain on the Select Committee system. It can throw into confusion parties' normal management of the House, and all for what, Mr Speaker? A bill which has not been introduced in urgency, a bill which the opposition is supporting because it's ostensibly a small step in a positive direction.
I don't know why.
Well, there we are. As my colleague has said, you don't know why, because it's been supported by the opposition in good faith on the basis that it's part of a normal legislative process. And now we find out that it's not. Now we find out that this is being rushed through the House, according to the government's timetable, in less than 2 months, Mr Speaker. That is outrageous. It is outrageous because there is no apparent justification for it. How do we know? Well, it just so happens that we have, under the Official Information Act, a Treasury Memorandum of the 22nd of February 2012, an aide memoire to the Minister of Finance, which sets out additional information on time frame for costs related to the establishment of the Advanced Technology Institute. I wish to acknowledge my excellent colleague Megan Woods MP, who's provided this document to the House. And what this shows is that the original Ministry of Science and Innovation proposal for ATI funding...
Order. This debate is a very narrow debate.
Yes, Mr Speaker.
And this debate's a very narrow debate, and under Standing Orders 2863, the member can't bring in the content of the bill, and I'll read it to you so that this may apply to others. Any debate on the question for a motion under this standing order is restricted to the special powers or instructions set out in the motion. It may not extend to the principles, objects or provisions of the bill to which the motion relates. So the member must talk, as he did earlier, as to the reasons why or why not there is a truncated period for the bill. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I appreciate your ruling, sir, but I think if you had waited just a little bit more, I was listening very carefully to my colleague, and he referred...
No, all right.
Well, Mr Speaker?
I'm inviting the member to continue, and I will listen very carefully from now on in. And the point I made was valid at the time, and I'm inviting the Honourable David...
Point of order, Mr.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I refer to you, Standing Order 2863. Any debate on the question for a motion under this standing order is restricted to the special powers or instruction. The instruction relates to the time frame, sir.
Yes.
My colleague was referring to the financial consequences of the time frame. It's nothing to do with the substance of the bill. It has to do with the timing of the bill, and therefore, sir, is something which is within the scope of this debate.
I will be listening very closely. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, may I offer a brief apology if the way that I framed this did not assist the Chair. Let me reread the title of the aide memoire in question, which is Additional Information on Time Frame for Costs. The substantive point that I wish to make, and I appreciate the intervention of my colleague Mr Mallard for assisting, was that the time frame was changed. It was delayed by the Treasury from the earlier time frame instituted or recommended by the Ministry of Science and Innovation, that the expenditure profile therefore slipped out a year, and one can only assume that the government is trying now to make up for lost time. But this appears to be bureaucratic slippage, and why it is denying the Parliament the opportunity to properly examine and debate what ought to be a relatively standard bill, which has not been introduced in urgency, which the opposition is supporting in principle, although there are issues with it, why the government would pull the stunt of asking for a report back in less than 2 months, less than half of the minimum period provided for in standing orders, it frankly beggars belief, Mr. Chairman. One can only assume that the government is making a habit of trifling with the House. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, Mr. Speaker, as you know, that is second-termitis writ large. That is what happens to governments when they've been getting just a little too comfortable on that side of the House, getting a little too snug in those seats in the LTDs, and they lose focus and they forget how it feels to real people out in real New Zealand. And in this case, the real people are the real scientists and innovators. Now, they want this, let's assume, but they want it done properly. They don't want to have to come back to the House in 6 months or a year's time to unpick drafting errors that should have been picked up the first time through. Now, the government is needlessly accentuating the risk of a drafting meltdown because it's not giving this a proper period of consideration. And what are we asking? I mean, the normal process is 6 months. Let's say the government's in something of a hurry and we took, 5 months or even 4 and a bit provided for in standing orders, and thus we wouldn't be having a debate on a motion which has now become debatable because of the government's unwarranted haste. We could be disposing of this early in the new year, but we're not. Instead, the government is putting pressure on the House, pressure on the select committee system, pressure on the sector to rush this through on Fridays when the House isn't sitting, to have the select committee meeting while the House is in session, denying members, for example, the opportunity to have full consideration of other bills and possibly questions. Why is the government doing this? Firstly, one wonders if the government has confidence in its own processes. My colleague Megan Woods has raised this issue in particular because of what appears to be bickering between the Treasury and the Ministry of Science and Innovation. Treasury said MSI's timetable, Mr. Speaker, timetable was not realistic, and they pushed it out a year. Mr. Speaker, it is unclear why the government is now attempting to overrule the Treasury and side with MSI, but I think I have a theory. MSI is part of MOBI. MOBI is the bureaucratic empire created to provide a fitting throne for Mr. Stephen Joyce, and Treasury reports to the other Minister of Finance, Mr. Bill English. Now, it is a legend around this place that the two don't often take tea. And it may be that there's a bit of tug-of-war going on here for the House timetable, resulting from, how would we put it, little disagreements, perhaps, between their respective bureaucratic empires. So there's a problem of confidence in the process. Is there confidence in the substance? Mr. Speaker, why would we be having this debate on the timeline if the government had the courage of its convictions and it believed that this would stand up to scrutiny?
The member withdraw that comment.
I withdraw that comment, Mr. Speaker. If the government had full confidence in the substance of the bill, it was a government, charitably speaking, a government composed of some members, but that's perhaps a liberal interpretation, but nonetheless the issue of confidence remains. Summing up, Mr. Speaker, there is no need for this to have an outrageous 2-month timeline turnaround. We should not be back having the second reading in November this year. It should be at least in the early part of next year. The government is abusing the standing orders of the House, which is why it is incurring the penalty of this becoming a debatable motion, because it has breached the normal 4-month rule for a report back. And all for what? It's got a bureaucratic mess between two departments, between two rival ministers. It's got an an inordinate pressure on House time. It lacks confidence in the process, it lacks confidence in the substance, and the people
Sorry
lack
to interrupt
confidence
the honourable
in it.
member. His time has expired. The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker,